Bella and Mortimer Goth are among the most iconic figures in the Sims franchise. Bella, in particular, appears across every mainline Sims game and most spin-offs, almost always central to the narrative of the game. However, despite their popularity, the Goths possess some of the most confusing and oftentimes contradictory lore in the entire series. I could just tell you the current Goth family lore and wrap this video up in about 5 minutes, but that wouldn't be doing them justice. There are over 25 years of twists, contradictions, and creative choices that make the Goths the icons they are today. So I'm gonna deep dive into the Goth family lore in the order that the games were released. After each mainline game era, I'll pause to summarize the evolving lore, culminating in a definitive timeline. So let's get started. The Goths debut in The Sims 1, residing at 5 Sim Lane in SimCity. In case you didn't know, The Sims was originally a spin-off of the SimCity series, an extraordinarily popular city building simulator. Up until The Sims 3, every game in the series was set in different parts of SimCity, itself part of a larger country called Sim Nation. Not super relevant to the Goth lore, but important to know. Mortimer Goth is a cheerful and outgoing Sim on the first steps of his scientist career. His biography highlights his old country upbringing, which hints that Mortimer immigrated to SimCity from somewhere else. Bella Goth, Mortimer's wife, is an elegant and athletic homemaker who enjoys spending her time golfing and playing the piano. Their daughter, Cassandra Goth, is a quiet, mysterious young girl who loves nothing more than burying her nose in a book. Mortimer and Bella have perfect compatibility with each other and their daughter, making them the ideal family. And they would be a pretty unremarkable family if not for the fact that their house is haunted. While it's no surprise to us today, back when The Sims first released, it was super unusual and a shock for most players when ghosts would randomly appear at night in the Goth household. The graveyard attached to their home holds 8 tombstones belonging to former Goth family members, with names like Grandma, Grandpa, Auntie, Uncle, and Cousin. Inexplicably, there's a ghost named Bratty who looks exactly like Cassandra, and another ghost called Boy who looks like Cassandra if she was a boy. There's also a ghost named Vegas who's never mentioned again in the series, but judging by his name and attire, he was probably a gambler. Since this was the very first game in the series, lore wasn't exactly top of mind for Maxis. So that's pretty much everything we know for sure about the Goth family. With the release of The Sims Unleashed, the game's 5th expansion pack, the Goth family tree expanded. Sim Lane was incorporated into SimCity's new historic Old Town district. Unleashed introduced a larger neighborhood, new townies, community lots, and most importantly, the Goth senior family. Gunther and Cornelia, Mortimer's elder parents, reside in a massive mansion at 77 Maple Street alongside their Siamese cats Hecuba and Menelaus. According to their bio, Gunther moved his family from the old country when Mortimer was still a child, and went on to become one of the founding fathers of the neighborhood. This detail reveals that Mortimer comes from old money, which explains how he can afford such an extravagant house despite being early in his career and supporting a single-income household. Gunther is a respected college dean, and much like Mortimer, enjoys a picture-perfect relationship with his wife Cornelia. Cornelia is the founder of the SimCity Bridge Society and enjoys high tea and phrenology. Phrenology is a now discredited pseudoscience that claims to predict personality and mental traits by examining the bumps and contours of the skull. If you've ever seen Django Unchained, Leonardo DiCaprio's character talks about this. And yes, phrenology is a belief system very commonly tied to racism and misogyny. Cornelia's association with it seems intended to show that the family is very much stuck in the past. This idea is reinforced by the name of their cats, which are taken from Euripides' Greek drama, Helen. The elder Goths are snooty, pretentious, and more than a little problematic, but despite all that, they're genuinely happy to live so close to their granddaughter. A few years after the release of The Sims, the game was reimagined for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. However, this version diverges from the established timeline in some pretty strange ways. Mortimer, Bella, and Cassandra now live at 5 Sim Avenue in Willville, a remixed version of Old Town located in Sim Valley. Mortimer has swapped his lab coat for the spotlight, reinventing himself as a B-movie star. Funny enough, Bella and Cassandra seem to have swapped personalities, with Bella now into reading and chess, and Cassandra spending her time playing piano and staying active. These inconsistencies have actually sparked some debate about whether the console versions take place before The Sims 1 on the PC. However, given how differently they're portrayed and how out of place the whole game feels, I'd argue that the game is not canon. The final game released during the Sims 1 era was The Sims Bustin Out, which also launched on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. This game served as the spiritual sequel to the console version, and like its predecessor, is not canon. And one of the biggest changes in Bustin Out is that Cassandra doesn't exist at all. Instead, Mortimer and Bella live alone as platonic roommates in a haunted manor. A bizarre dynamic considering they're married in every other version. Mortimer is once again a scientist, and Bella is now the movie star. Speaking of Bella, she goes through the most significant transformation in Busting Out. Her bio suddenly claims she comes from a long line of occultists and mystics. She even has a second step-cousin named Vera Vex, and her appearance, completely different. Gone is her signature black hair and medium dark skin tone, replaced by red hair and a noticeably lighter complexion. So with only The Sims 1 on PC being canon, here's the Goth family history up to this point. Gunther and Cornelia Goth are born in the Old Country. As they grow older, Gunther marries Cornelia and together they have a son named Mortimer. Around the same time, Bella is born in Sim City. Years later, Gunther, Cornelia, and Mortimer immigrate to Sim City and go on to establish Old Town. Various Goth family members move to Old Town and eventually pass away with no reason given. As Mortimer grows into adulthood, he becomes a scientist and marries Bella. Soon after, Mortimer and Bella have their first child, Cassandra. Sim City invests in Old Town, expanding and revitalizing the district. The Sims became a colossal success, and just 4 years later, a sequel was released, ushering in the single and most defining era of Goth family lore. The Sims 2 takes place 25 years after The Sims 1, with the Goth family now living at 165 Sim Lane in Pleasant View. While it's never explicitly confirmed that Pleasant View is the same Old Town from The Sims 1, there's plenty of evidence to suggest they're one and the same. The inclusion of Sim Lane, along with local services and newspapers referring to Pleasant View as part of Sim City, strongly hints at continuity. Even the neighborhood's intro mentions new faces in town, creating tensions with long-established families, all implying that this is the same town we knew before. So we can surmise that at some point between Sims 1 and 2, Old Town was rezoned and became Pleasant View. Mortimer is now an elder, living with his adult daughter Cassandra and his young son Alexander. Bella is famously missing, her disappearance serving as the game's central storyline. The Goth graveyard is no longer just unnamed tombstones and is now populated with named family members, finally allowing us to piece together the Goth family tree. By this point, Gunther and Cornelia have passed away, and we learn the names of Gunther's grandparents, Victor and Gretel Goth. We also find the gravestones of Simon and Agnes Crumplebottom. The Sims 2 reveals that Cornelia was a Crumplebottom before marriage, with her sister being none other than Agnes Crumplebottom, the infamous purse-wielding wet blanket from The Sims Hot Date. Simon Crumplebottom is the father of Agnes and Cornelia, and while his wife's gravestone doesn't appear in the game, Mortimer's family tree reveals her name to be Prudence Crumplebottom. The family tree also introduces us to Frida Goth, Gunther's sister, who has long since passed on. Perhaps the most surprising bit of new lore is that Bella's maiden name is Batchelor, the sister of Michael Batchelor, who we first met back in The Sims 1. The Sims 2 begins with Cassandra ready to start a family of her own, while Mortimer is doing his best to move on from Bella's disappearance. Mortimer has retired from his science career and has begun a new relationship with Dina Caliente, a younger, ambitious Sim with questionable motives. Cassandra is engaged to the local womanizer Don Lothario, and like her father, has pursued a career in science. Alexander is a quiet, studious young boy, much like how Cassandra was when she was a child. Interestingly, exploring other households in Pleasant View reveals more about what happened to Bella. The Caliente sisters Dina and Nina moved to town the night before Bella vanished, strongly implying their arrival may not have been a coincidence. On top of that, it's heavily suggested that Dina is only pursuing Mortimer for his wealth, and Don Lothario's true intentions with Cassandra remain murky at best. Don's involvement in Bella Goth's disappearance is especially suspicious, as she was last seen on the deck of his condo the night that she vanished. His memories reveal that he made an advance on Bella, which she swiftly rejected. The memory system in The Sims 2 is a useful feature that lets us piece together key events that happen in a Sim's life, helping us better understand their story and lore. We learned that Bella was using his telescope the night she was abducted by aliens. And no, that's not a euphemism. I feel like I keep going on tangents, and I promise this won't be the last time, but we need to talk about how the Sims team doesn't know how time works. Bella and Mortimer are supposed to be the same age, with Mortimer perhaps being slightly older. Don is a young adult at the start of the game, which means that he should be an elder by now, right? Dina and Nina showed up right when Bella disappeared, so technically they should also be elders by now, right? I'm just gonna chalk that up to developer oversight. Speaking of the Caliente sisters, Dina and Nina are heavily implied to be involved in Bella's disappearance, but the key word is implied. Their memories don't contain any direct evidence, but their suspicious timing and shady connections have led many to believe they were the masterminds behind the whole plot. Dina Caliente was married to Bella's brother, Michael Batchelor. After The Sims 1, Michael Batchelor became wealthy, but eventually died of old age, leaving his fortune to Dina, who promptly squandered it. Dina set her sights on Mortimer Goth for similar reasons, all while carrying on an affair with Don Lothario. That's not enough evidence to claim that the Caliente sisters abducted Bella, but here's the interesting bit. Dina and Nina's father was a Sim named Flamenco Caliente, but Flamenco was born from the alien Pollination Technician 7. If you didn't know, aliens send out pollination technicians whose job is to abduct and impregnate male Sims, leading to alien Sim hybrids being born. We're not going to think too hard about the exact mechanic of how this works, but the point is, Nina and Dina Caliente are part alien. This paints a sinister picture where Dina and Nina orchestrated the abduction of Bella Goth to make way for Dina's gold-digging scheme. While all of this unfolds, Cassandra seems totally unaware of what's happening. She's deeply in love with Don Lothario, despite the overwhelming evidence of his infidelity. Of course, while all this drama unfolds in Pleasantview, it turns out that Bella is in fact in the game. Strangetown, one of the 3 neighborhoods released with The Sims 2, was designed to tap into the early 2000s obsession with aliens, conspiracies, and Area 51. Residents report seeing Bella wandering around town, and sure enough, we can find her in-game, but something's not quite right. Examining her, we find that she has no relationships with the Goth family or memories of her abduction. This has led to speculation that Strangetown Bella isn't the real Bella, but Maxis has confirmed they are indeed one and the same. So we have to conclude that Bella's memory was wiped when she was dropped into Strangetown, where she now wanders aimlessly, completely disconnected from her past. I'm adding this after I filmed this entire video, but I neglected to talk about why Bella is still a young adult despite Mortimer being an elder. I like to believe whatever the aliens did to Bella included keeping her young. It's silly, but it works in the lore, so that's what I'm going with. And at this point you might be asking yourself, if people were talking about Bella's sudden reappearance in Strangetown, why didn't Mortimer try to find her? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the memory system in The Sims 2 lets us not only see a Sim's past events, but also how they felt about those moments. Green memories are positive experiences and red ones are negative. Cassandra Goth sees her mother's abduction as a negative, while Mortimer sees it as a positive. This subtle detail completely reframes Mortimer and Bella's relationship. I'm sure a lot of you in the comments are going to say that because Mortimer is a knowledge sim, he would have taken the abduction as a positive. However, you do have to keep in mind that the Sims team would have chosen his exact history step by step by step. And I cannot accept that he would have just been okay with that, especially if they went through the trouble of saying how he was broken up about it, etc. And the fact that he started a relationship with Dina Caliente, it doesn't make sense. I agree from a technical level that is why it's green. I think they kept it green as a deliberate choice. He isn't heartbroken about Bella's disappearance, he's freed from her. Something between The Sims 1 and The Sims 2 caused their marriage to fall apart, and we learn exactly what that was in The Sims 2 console games. Like The Sims 1, The Sims 2 was ported to multiple consoles, and one of the most fascinating of these versions is The Sims 2 on the PlayStation Portable, an episodic RPG that takes place entirely in Strangetown. This game takes place after The Sims 2, where Bella has fully settled into Strangetown and even purchased a home, one that she promptly gives away because it's haunted by pesky ghosts. Thanks to the game's unique secrets mechanic, we learn that Bella is actively hiding from the aliens who abducted her, and perhaps most shocking of all, never loved Mortimer and only stayed with him for his money. This secret reveals that Bella was fully aware of her past life in Pleasantview, and was actively choosing not to return because it was a life she didn't want. This turns everything we knew about Bella and Mortimer upside down. Was Bella intentionally avoiding her family after her return? Was her visit to Don Lothario's purely neighborly, or was there more going on? And did Bella even want children? One of my viewers, shout out to Caitlin Francisco, pointed out that this interview with Bella posted on the official Sims site seems to retcon certain aspects of the lore, such as Bella being in love with Mortimer and why she can't return to Pleasantview. But as fun as this is, I don't really give it much credence as it's not backed by anything that happens in games. For this video, I'm not really going to consider it canon. Unfortunately, the final game in the Sims 2 era doesn't answer any of these questions. The Sims 2 on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance is an absolutely bonkers video game. The in-game lore suggests that the events of the game are part of a television show that the Goths themselves are watching, with Mortimer, Bella, and Cassandra opening and closing each episode. Combined with timeline inconsistencies and fantastical events, it's safe to say this version is not canon. Alright, with all of that uncovered, it's time to officially rewrite the Goth family history with everything we've learned from The Sims 2. Victor Goth is born in the Old Country. Victor marries a woman named Gretel, and they have 2 children, Gunther and Frida. Around the same time, Cornelia Crumplebottom is born to Simon and Prudence Crumplebottom. As they grow older, Gunther marries Cornelia, and together they have a son named Mortimer. Not long after, Bella is born to Simis and Jocasta Bachelor in SimCity. Victor and Gretel pass away, and Gunther, Cornelia, and Mortimer immigrate to SimCity and go on to establish Old Town. A young Mortimer meets Bella Bachelor, and they become best friends. As teenagers, Mortimer and Bella begin dating, although Bella seems more interested in his wealth. As Mortimer grows into adulthood, he becomes a scientist and marries Bella. Soon after, Mortimer and Bella have their first child, Cassandra. Around this time, Frida Goth passes away. SimCity invests in Old Town, expanding and revitalizing the district. A few years later, Mortimer and Bella welcome their second child, Alexander. Gunther Goth passes away, and Cassandra becomes best friends with Mary Sue Pleasant. Old Town prospers once again and becomes Pleasantview. At some point, the relationship between Bella and Mortimer sours. One evening, Bella visits Don Lothario and is abducted by aliens. Cornelia Goth passes away and Cassandra meets and gets engaged to Don Lothario. Mortimer retires and begins a relationship with Dina Caliente. Years later, Bella escapes her alien captors and hides in Strangetown, avoiding her old life. She purchases a haunted estate, but eventually gives it away thanks to a pesky ghost problem. And believe it or not, things are about to get way more complicated. In 2009, The Sims 3 released, and surprisingly, it turned out to be a prequel. Well, kind of. And honestly, this is one of the most confusing parts of The Sims lore, so let's set the record straight. At launch, The Sims 3 gave players just one world to explore, Sunset Valley, a world set 25 years before the events of The Sims 1. However, unlike previous games, each new world in The Sims 3 didn't follow a linear timeline. Instead, each world exists at a different point along the broader Sims timeline, with some acting as prequels, others as parallel stories, and a few taking place well after the events of The Sims 2. But for now, we're in the past. The Sims 3 rewrote the lore of Gunther and Cornelia Goth, claiming Sunset Valley was founded by the Goths before Pleasantview even existed. This has sparked a lot of debate among fans. Is Sunset Valley actually Pleasantview in its early days? Or is it a completely separate town that was founded beforehand? The Sims 1 makes it very clear that Mortimer and his parents came to Old Town from the Old Country. Since The Sims 3 takes place before The Sims 1, Gunther and Cornelia Goth founded Sunset Valley, largely thanks to their close connection with the Landgrab family. And at some point, the Landgrabs moved away, taking their wealth and influence with them, and Sunset Valley would be restructured and rezoned by SimCity into smaller districts, one of which being Old Town. Over time, the Goth family revitalized Old Town, and it eventually evolved into what we know today as Pleasantview. The Sims 3 introduced us to much younger versions of Gunther, Cornelia, and Mortimer Goth living at 13 Skyborough Boulevard. Gunther's biography reveals that he didn't earn his wealth, he inherited it. Their home is still haunted by the ghosts of Victor and Gretel Goth, along with Simon and Prudence Crumplebottom, but notably Frida Goth is missing, and we'll see why shortly. One particularly curious addition to the happy haunts is Lolita Goth. Lolita Goth has been the subject of debate for many years. She's not included on the Goth family tree, and with one exception that I'll cover later, she's never mentioned again in the series. Her cause of death is listed as electrocution during young adulthood, but beyond that, we have little more than speculation. For now, let's talk about the living Goths. In The Sims 3, the relationship between Gunther and Cornelia appears strained, suggesting that the years spent building up Old Town may have been what ultimately strengthened their bond. Cornelia is best friends with her sister Agnes Crumplebottom and spends much of her time socializing with Sunset Valley's elite. As for Mortimer, he's portrayed as a rather grumpy child, which is a sharp contrast to the more cheerful and composed man we've seen in previous games. His best friend is none other than his neighbor Bella Batchelor, who lives with her brother Michael and their parents Simus and Jocasta over at 12 Sim Lane. Bella is described as the perfect child, kind, good-natured, and popular. But if you look closely at her bedroom decor, you'll notice hints of an interest in the macabre and paranormal, suggesting that even early on, she may have been drawn to Mortimer's slightly darker personality. Heck, maybe him becoming such a positive person is what drove her away. We learn nothing new about the Goths until the 6th Sims 3 expansion pack, Showtime. While no Goth members appear directly, it gives us the most significant addition to the Goth lore in years, the Plasma Punch Gyroscopic Conductor. You have no idea how many times I recorded that. The dance sphere has been around since the early days of The Sims, but Showtime took it to a whole new level, allowing it to be upgraded for time travel. Using the PPGC, Sims might stumble upon a massive green gem statue of Empress Bella Goth, seated atop a golden throne. And it doesn't stop there. While sneaking through a ruined alien city, your Sim can nearly stumble into a group of aliens, all bowing before a mysterious regal-looking Sim and quietly chanting Bella in hushed monotone voices. This discovery suggests that after her time hiding in Strangetown, that Bella eventually returned to her alien captors, rose to power, and became their empress. But it also forces us to face a hard truth. Bella didn't just vanish. She chose a life of adventure and power, leaving Mortimer, Cassandra, and Alexander behind to fully embrace her new destiny. This theory is officially canonized with the release of the DLC world Lunar Lakes, which takes place far into the future, long after the events of The Sims 2. According to the lore of Lunar Lakes, a group of explorers from SimCity became stranded on an alien planet. Against all odds, they built a thriving colony, one that would flourish for generations and become known as Lunar Lakes. Among the inhabitants of Lunar Lakes, we meet Matilda Goth, a mail carrier and direct descendant of the Goth family. But even more intriguing, we discover the ghost of Bella Goth herself. Bella's body rests in Lunar Lakes, with her cause of death listed as old age. And although her appearance is notably different from her Sims 2 counterpart, the developers have confirmed this is the Bella Goth. And while we don't know exactly how Bella ended up in Lunar Lakes, it strongly suggests that Bella never returned to Pleasantview, instead choosing to spend her final days on a distant world far from the family and life she once had. A few months later, the Sims 3 Supernatural expansion pack introduced us to an entirely new world, and with it, more pieces of the Goth family history. In the town of Moonlight Falls, we're reunited with Frida Goth, the departed sister of Gunther Goth. Frida had been chosen to marry a member of the Landgrab family, a union clearly arranged to strengthen the ties between the Landgrabs and Goths of Sunset Valley. However, Frida resented the arrangement, having no interest in love or commitment, and so she ran away. Her decision led to a falling out between her and Gunther, one that was sadly never resolved. This event could be why the Landgrabs left Sunset Valley, which makes Frida an incredibly pivotal character. Frida didn't leave on her own. She moved into 249 Valley View Drive with her eccentric uncle Samuel Goth and his much younger wife Olivia. Samuel was known for his odd behavior, and his marriage to a younger woman only fueled local gossip. While rumors swirled that Olivia only married Samuel for the Goth family fortune, it's clear she truly loved him, something that became tragically evident after Samuel's death from eating a magical jelly bean. Devastated by his passing, Olivia accidentally shorted out a stereo, which electrocuted her, causing a house fire that also claimed Frida's life. After their passing, Frida, Samuel, and Olivia continued to occupy the house as ghosts, forming friendships with other spectral residents, and even gaining a new roommate, psychic Helen Hall. She's a band manager and not a fortune teller, and well, there's no explanation for that one. Before we continue, it's worth taking a moment to talk about the many Goth Easter eggs scattered across The Sims 3. These Easter eggs do complicate the timeline a little bit, especially when The Sims 3 is supposed to take place before Bella's disappearance. But it's safe to say that these were just fun references added by the developers, not necessarily intended to influence or alter the official lore. Players could eventually purchase Lady Ravendancer Goth's Book of Spells, a tome that teaches Sims curses and hexes, but aside from the name, we know nothing else about Lady Ravendancer Goth, for now. The most intriguing Easter eggs, however, come in the form of two books, Murder in Pleasantview and Baron Graf von Gould. Both are credited to Alexander Goth as the author. The most puzzling is Murder in Pleasantview, since in The Sims 3, Pleasantview doesn't exist yet. This has led to widespread fan theories, with some suggesting that Alexander may have become a time traveler, or that he was trying to piece together the mystery of his mother's disappearance. Fortunately, there's a simple in-game explanation. The second expansion pack for The Sims 3, Ambitions, introduced a time machine that allows Sims to travel to both the past and the future. One possible outcome of these time travel adventures is returning with books from those alternate timelines. So Murder in Pleasantview likely wasn't written yet, and it was brought back from the future where Alexander Goth was a famous writer. And the novel is likely fictional with no direct ties to his mother's disappearance. But on the topic of Alexander, let's talk about The Sims 3 for the Nintendo DS. Released in 2010, the game is meant to be a much simplified version of the PC version set in the neighborhood of Beacon Bay rather than Sunset Valley. The neighborhood bio claims that Beacon Bay came before Pleasantview, but Holly Alto and Alexander Goth are adults here, despite Holly being much younger in The Sims 3 and Alexander not even existing yet at that point in the timeline. Here, Alexander is married to Cecilia Goth and has risen to become a CEO, though the game never clarifies of what, while Cecilia taking on the role of a homemaker. I believe the neighborhood bio was an oversight by the developers who simply copy and pasted the bio from Sunset Valley since it's almost identical. If we take that away, nothing in the game contradicts existing lore, so it's safe to say that Alexander grew up, left Pleasantview, and married Cecilia. The final game in the Sims 3 era to feature the Goths is The Sims 3 Pets. Released for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Nintendo 3DS, The Sims 3 Pets was all about making cute cats and dogs and having Sims to interact with them. In the town of Sugar Maple Coast, we're introduced to Rebecca and Buttons Goth. Her bio states Rebecca heard stories for years of her great-grandfather and the town he carved out of the wilderness, and she decided to come to town to learn more about her family history. Her great-grandfather is revealed to be Mynameisgonz, captain of the Hawthorn and the oldest known Goth family member. Another ghost found here is Angela Gilman, said to have married a member of the Goth family despite her father's disapproval. The most likely candidate is Timaeus, though there's no concrete evidence to prove it. This game complicates matters. If Timaeus is Rebecca's great-grandfather and the oldest known Goth, it would imply Timaeus is older than Victor Goth, Mortimer's grandfather. Rebecca's bio implies she's a descendant of the Goths we know, so unless she's a cousin of Mortimer or something, the timelines don't add up. There are no other returning families in this game, so I wouldn't say it's not canon. If we take Rebecca's bio literally, she and anyone else in town wouldn't know any other Goth besides Timaeus. And for reasons we never learned, Timaeus never shared his family's history. This game could take place anytime after the events of The Sims 2, and Rebecca and Timaeus are likely descendants of Cassandra or Alexander Goth. Okay, that was a lot, but with the conclusion of the Sims 3 era, let's go ahead and rewrite the Goth family history with everything we know now. The oldest known member of the Goth family, Lady Ravendancer Goth, is born, becomes a famous spellcaster, and passes away. Victor and Samuel Goth are born in the Old Country. Victor marries a woman named Gretel, and they have 2 children, Gunther and Frida. Around the same time, Cornelia Crumplebottom is born to Simon and Prudence Crumplebottom. As they grow older, Gunther marries Cornelia, and together they have a son named Mortimer. Not long after, Bella is born to Simus and Jocasta Bachelor in SimCity. Victor and Gretel pass away, and Gunther, Cornelia, and Mortimer immigrate to SimCity and with the help of the land grabs, establish Sunset Valley. Lolita Goth presumably dies of electrocution at some point. Frida and Samuel Goth join their family in Sunset Valley. A young Mortimer meets Bella Bachelor and they become best friends. As teenagers, Mortimer and Bella begin dating, although Bella seems more interested in his wealth. Samuel meets and marries Olivia, a younger woman. Frida, unwilling to marry a land grab, leaves Sunset Valley with Samuel and Olivia for Moonlight Falls, which causes a rift between Frida and Gunther. As a result, the land grabs leave Sunset Valley, causing the town to decline and eventually become known as Old Town. As Mortimer grows into adulthood, he becomes a scientist and marries Bella. Soon after, Mortimer and Bella have their first child, Cassandra. Later, Samuel Goth dies from a magic jelly bean accident, and Olivia accidentally burns down the house, perishing with Frida. SimCity invests in Old Town, expanding and revitalizing the district. A few years later, Mortimer and Bella welcome their second child, Alexander. Gunther Goth passes away, and Cassandra becomes best friends with Mary Sue Pleasant. Old Town prospers once again and becomes Pleasantview. At some point, the relationship between Bella and Mortimer sours. One evening, Bella visits Don Lothario and is abducted by aliens. Cornelia Goth passes away, and Cassandra meets and gets engaged to Don Lothario. Mortimer retires and begins a relationship with Dina Caliente. Years later, Bella escapes her alien captors and hides in Strangetown, avoiding her old life. She purchases a haunted estate, but eventually gives it away thanks to a pesky ghost problem. Eventually, Bella returns to her alien captors and becomes empress of their civilization. Mortimer passes away peacefully. Alexander Goth becomes a renowned author, moves to Beacon Bay, and marries Cecilia. Cassandra, Alexander, and Cecilia all pass away from natural causes. Years later, Captain Mynameisgonz founds Sugar Maple Coast and eventually passes away. Sometime later, his great-granddaughter Rebecca Goth moves to Sugar Maple Coast to learn more about her family before eventually passing away. Decades later, an unknown Goth descendant joins the space exploration mission that goes on to establish Lunar Lakes. Matilda Goth, a descendant of that explorer, lives a modest life as a mail carrier in Lunar Lakes. Finally, Bella Goth, sustained by alien technology, arrives at Lunar Lakes and spends her final days there until she eventually passes away. Believe it or not, right before the release of The Sims 4, we get a significant update to Bella's story from a Facebook app of all places. The Sims Social, released in 2011, revealed that Bella first reappeared in the town of Little Haven after her abduction, with no memory of what happened to her. Throughout the game, she actively searches for answers about her abductors and her past life, even going to therapy to help recover those memories. In the end, she's successful, but the story concludes with Bella expressing hope that she'll one day meet her alien captors again. A mobile game called The Sims Freeplay released a year later, but Bella's just an Easter egg, so not canon. When The Sims 4 launched in 2014, we saw the return of familiar faces such as the Goths, the Caliente sisters, Don Lothario, and the Landgrabs. However, their ages, relationships, and traits didn't align with the established timeline from previous games. Attempts to place The Sims 4 on The Sims timeline proved fruitless. Eventually, Sarah Holding, former producer for The Sims 4, announced on Twitter that the game takes place in an alternate timeline. This statement sent lore enthusiasts, myself included, into theory crafting mode. We explored explanations involving time travel, alien interference, and other creative solutions in order to make The Sims 4 fit into the timeline. But let's focus on the second part of Sarah's comment. It was the most flexible way for us to keep all your favorite Sims in The Sims 4. This tells us that the goal wasn't to build a structured alternate universe, but rather to prioritize fan service over strict adherence to the lore. In other words, The Sims 4 was never intended to be limited by previous timelines or continuity. On one hand, The Sims 4 honors parts of the established history, for example the storybook nursery kit referencing Bella Goth's disappearance, and on the other hand, it freely retcons major pieces of lore when it suits the developer's vision. A prime example is Nyan Spectre from The Sims 4 Life and Death, who is a retcon of the character Nervous Subject in The Sims 2. The idea of an alternate reality was a diplomatic way for the producers of The Sims 4 to say that they were doing their own thing. Like it or not, and I don't, The Sims 4 is the present timeline. Any decisions made in The Sims 4, whether it contradicts older lore or not, takes precedence and overwrites what came before. I know that can be frustrating, especially for those of us who have been piecing together this intricate puzzle for years. But the truth is, The Sims is not pursuing a multiverse. That means that any new content released from this point forward is canon, even if it conflicts with previous games. So with all that laid out, welcome to The Sims 4. We find our familiar friends the Goths living in Ophelia Villa, located in the Pendeleview neighborhood of Willow Creek. Mortimer Goth is now an adult, working as a writer and portrayed as an intelligent, thoughtful man. Bella Goth is a young adult, working as a secret agent, and is described as very family-oriented. Cassandra Goth is a teenager, focused less on school and more on making music. Alexander Goth is a child, dedicated to his studies and schoolwork. As for where The Sims 4 fits in the broader timeline, I believe it sits between The Sims 1 and The Sims 2. Much like The Sims 3, The Sims 4 seems to exist in different points of the timeline depending on the world or household. The household bio for the Goth family indicates Bella's disappearances, which has led fans to believe that the game takes place after The Sims 2, but I don't think that's the case. Consider this, Bella is a secret agent, a role that would naturally involve frequent absences. The reference to her disappearance is likely just a clever nod to her iconic lore rather than evidence of timeline placement. Also, the ages of the Goth family members fit perfectly if we fit the game between The Sims 1 and 2. Which means the Goths moved from Old Town, stayed in Willow Creek, and then returned to Pleasantview. Mortimer being a writer instead of a scientist contradicts previous lore, but likely this was due to the science career not being part of the base game. The Sims team is famously strict about not updating pre-made Sims after release, so this choice was likely one of practicality rather than lore rewriting. Alexander being an older child does stretch the timeline slightly, but considering that toddlers didn't exist at launch, it's an understandable creative decision. Bella's secret agent career casts her Sims 2 story in a new light, explaining how she might have had the skills to not only escape her captors, but to overthrow them completely. While her family-oriented trait seems out of place given what we've learned about her reluctance toward family life. One way to interpret this is that her current life, marriage, children, suburban life, is part of her cover as a secret agent, much like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is far more interesting and plausible than a simple retcon, so I'm gonna go with that. From here, we really don't see the Goths again until The Sims Mobile, which was released in 2018, as a mobile game obviously, which featured Bella Goth serving as the game's tutorial guide. There's no story here, she looks completely different, and again, it's just a subtle nod to Bella, so not canon. The next time we hear about the Goths is 4 years later with the release of The Sims 4 High School Years expansion pack. As part of the promotional material, they introduced the Copperdale class of 2000, which includes Bella and Mortimer as teens. Look, I don't mean to complicate this any further, but despite being a downloadable household, this is not canon. It was a fun way to show famous Sims townies as high schoolers, that's it. Believe it or not, we went nearly 10 full years without any meaningful Goth lore, until the release of The Sims 4's 17th expansion pack, Life and Death. In this expansion, we finally learn more about Lady Ravendancer Goth, a powerful spellcaster and tarot reader from the mysterious land of Ravenwood. This confirms that the old country referenced all the way back in The Sims 1 is in fact Ravenwood. When speaking to Ravendancer, players learned that a group of nomads who settled in Crow's Crossing misinterpreted her presence, believing she was an enchantress sent to deceive them. She also reveals that the Gomez family is distantly related to the Goths. Since they're connected to the Goths, it's only fitting that we take a moment to talk about the Gomez family. The Gomez family isn't just a random family. Each member comes with a detailed backstory and intriguing connections that weave directly into the broader Goth legacy. At the head of the family are Radwan and Zipporah. Their bios and traits reveal that both of them previously died and made the choice to be reborn. Zipporah Gomez is a Gomez by blood and through ambrosia was able to be reborn as herself. Zipporah shares ongoing tension with her sibling Esther Gomez, who refuses to be reborn. G apparently knew Lady Ravendancer Goth personally, hinting that both Esther and Zipporah lived during Lady Ravendancer's lifetime. We don't know who Radwan was in a previous life, but we do know he chose to be reborn, adopting the name Radwan and taking his wife's surname, Gomez. He has the deja vu sentiment towards Zipporah, indicating they shared a connection in their past life. Radwan is notably transgender, one of the few Sims in the game to be so. Zipporah reinforces this by mentioning that he's lived 2 lives just in this body. Curiously, Radwan is known to have dated Lane Coffin, so maybe the two had a bit of an open relationship. Together, Radwan and Zipporah have a teenage child, Mynameisgonz. Zelmira is deeply passionate about tarot reading and collecting tarot cards. Their fascination with ghosts and the supernatural firmly ties them to the Goths' mystical legacy, even catching the attention of Lady Ravendancer herself. To everyone's surprise, Ravendancer reveals that Lolita Goth is the first notable figure in the Goth family history and the common line with the Gomezes. With all of the pieces in place, we now have everything we need in order to construct the definitive Goth family history. The earliest known member of the Goth family, Lolita Goth, is born in Ravenwood, a region that their lineage is said to have founded. At the same time, a relative or spouse from her line branches off and forms the Gomez family. Lolita Goth presumably dies of electrocution at some point. Years later, the gifted spellcaster Lady Ravendancer Goth is born. Around the same time, Esther and Zipporah Gomez are born. Ravendancer masters tarot and passes into legend. Eventually, Ravendancer, Zipporah, Esther, and the person who will become Radwan pass away. Generations later, Victor and Samuel Goth are born. Victor marries a Ravenwood girl named Gretel, and they have 2 children, Gunther and Frida. Around the same time, Cornelia Crumplebottom is born to Simon and Prudence Crumplebottom. As they grow older, Gunther marries Cornelia, and together they have a son named Mortimer. Not long after, Bella is born to Simus and Jocasta Batchelor in SimCity. Victor and Gretel pass away, and Gunther, Cornelia, and Mortimer immigrate to SimCity and with the help of the Landgrabs, establish Sunset Valley. Frida and Samuel Goth join their family in Sunset Valley. A young Mortimer meets Bella Batchelor and they become best friends. As teenagers, Mortimer and Bella begin dating, although Bella seems more interested in his wealth. Samuel meets and marries Olivia, a younger woman. Frida, unwilling to marry a Landgrab, leaves Sunset Valley with Samuel and Olivia for Moonlight Falls, which causes a rift between Frida and Gunther. As a result, the Landgrabs leave Sunset Valley, causing the town to decline and eventually become known as Old Town. As Mortimer grows into adulthood, he becomes a scientist and marries Bella. Soon after, Mortimer and Bella have their first child, Cassandra. Later, Samuel Goth dies from a magic jelly bean accident, and Olivia accidentally burns down the house, perishing with Frida. SimCity invests in Old Town, expanding and revitalizing the district. A few years later, Mortimer and Bella welcome their second child, Alexander. Gunther Goth passes away, and Cassandra becomes best friends with Mary Sue Pleasant. Old Town prospers once again and becomes Pleasantview. The Goths move to Willow Creek, only to return to Pleasantview shortly after. At some point, the relationship between Bella and Mortimer sours. One evening, Bella visits Don Lothario and is abducted by aliens. Cornelia Goth passes away, and Cassandra meets and gets engaged to Don Lothario. Mortimer retires and begins a relationship with Dina Caliente. Years later, Bella escapes her captors and goes into hiding in Strangetown, her mind completely wiped. Eventually, she finds her way to Little Haven, where her new friends help her piece together her lost memories. With her memories restored, she returns to Strangetown. She purchases a haunted estate, but eventually gives it away thanks to a pesky ghost problem. Eventually, Bella returns to her alien captors and becomes empress of their civilization. Mortimer passes away peacefully. Zipporah and Radwan pass away, presumably to be reborn. Alexander Goth becomes a renowned author, moves to Beacon Bay, and marries Cecilia. Cassandra, Alexander, Cecilia, and Zelmira pass away peacefully. Years later, Captain Mynameisgonz founds Sugar Maple Coast and eventually passes away. Sometime later, his great-granddaughter Rebecca Goth moves to Sugar Maple Coast to learn more about her family before eventually passing away. Decades later, an unknown Goth descendant joins the space exploration mission that goes on to establish Lunar Lakes. Matilda Goth, a descendant of that explorer, lives a modest life as a mail carrier in Lunar Lakes. Finally, Bella Goth, sustained by alien technology, arrives at Lunar Lakes and spends her final days there until she eventually passes away. And with that, the long, remarkable story of the Goth family comes to an end. If you stuck around to the end, thank you so much for taking this journey with me. I hope you found it useful in fully understanding how the lore of the Goth family truly came to be. Of course, if you disagree with some of my assertions, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Also, let me know what Sims family you'd like me to do next. I don't think there's another family more complex than the Goths, so I don't imagine any other video is going to be this long. Having to produce this video plus my weekly shorts and my full-time job takes a lot out of me. So if you'd like to support me continuing to make videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description, and thank you again to my Patreon supporters for everything that you do for me. It means the world. All right, see you guys in the next one.